four pillars that hold up the world. And they're similar to I don't know what they were called, the four thingies. It was the justice of the great, the valor of the brave, the prayers of the righteous, and the something of the something.
Sounds like
Brave, righteous, justice of the great. I can't remember the last one.
you probably took it right off of the temperance.
Oh, and learning of the wise, that's it. So, yeah, it probably was taken from,
Sounds
was it
like.
Plato or Aristotle, or who did those
Plato
four
gives
virtues?
us the first four virtues,
Plato, okay.
or at least they're codified that way. Where he got them, they do talk a lot about previous Greek writers and so on. But yeah, Plato gives us those, and those are still with us. We still hang on to those as significant.
Yeah, certainly.
And then we've got, at least in what we might call Western culture, or Christian culture, we've got the three associated with Christianity: faith, hope, and charity.
Those were love, charity, and something?
Faith in God, hope that the narrative that Jesus gave us is going to occur. That there will be a salvation, and then charity, love for others.
Charity and love. Yeah, that makes sense.
Charity and love is one. That's one.
Yeah.
It worked out oddly. I grew up with charity being a virtue, and then people talked about love. Only later I end up realizing, well, wait a minute. The Greek and Latin are really, that's two different English words for the same thing.
Yeah.
And
We don't use charity. Well, I mean, we use it in a very specific way. We use it to give away or to provide for those who don't have,
caring,
but it's a
caring for others, loving others.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Of course, there would be physical ways of giving people things and helping them find food and shelter and things of that sort. Just last night in a discussion, I said to some friends that who mentioned, well, that's not a particularly Christianity. I said, well, actually, I don't know of any Christianity that's particularly Christian. Theoretically, no one lives according to Jesus' teaching.
not in the full.
You probably can't. Not as a community. Somebody's got to. Not just walk around.
Changes the structure of things a lot from what we have.
If you don't mind me asking, what's your belief? Like, what do you believe in?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I was raised Roman Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and I went through a crisis as I was learning all this stuff. As the different philosophers were introduced to me, this guy is definitely better than that one.
Yeah.
Oh, and this one's better than. You really get punch drunk after a while. You get depressed, because one week I'm learning all about this guy and thinking, hey, we've got the answers, and then the next guy comes along and says, no, he's wrong.
Yeah.
And here's why. And so I reached a point where I basically couldn't believe in anything. That's thank you, David Hume, the skeptic of skeptics, which we'll cover.
Okay.
So be ready. That we're going to
I've heard of him, so.
cover. We'll do him. But then you come out of that, and Hegel was really like the philosopher for me that kind of gave me the answer that's essentially the template that I continue to find that works. That's the big picture. And his template includes the idea that there's an absolute, that there's God. What is it? For me, as we'll see, it's basically the structure of the universe, right? Whatever organized the universe that we're in.
Yeah.
But you also need, personal role models and so on. So I still think of myself as kind of back to being, a Catholic in the sense of some of the theologians I've read.
Yeah.
But when you compare what they said, Pope Benedict the 16th, most Christians I know, and Catholics especially, no familiarity with his theological books.
Mhm.
They're in the store, you can buy them.
Yeah.
But no one reads those. And yet when you read them, you feel like, aha, this is the updated way of explaining how all of that worked. And it still works for me,
Yeah.
in the new, more modern language that he was speaking and explaining all of this. And that fits beautifully. So
Yeah.
I feel that I'm still Roman Catholic in that sense,
Yeah.
right? But of course I go to the fellowship every week, or other things, and the Unitarian Universalists basically have no dogma.
Oh, is it like no?
That's like a
specific-
philosophy club,
Okay.
where everybody has their own beliefs, but they like being with one another because they all read, they all discuss
Yeah.
various issues and so on. So I attend that.
Yeah.
I still I go on online and watch Catholic masses.
Mhm.
Does that count as attendance? It's the repetition of
Yeah.
the narrative. That you need that in order to feel like, that's still a viable narrative, right?
Yeah.
But it is very different than what I'm sure many Catholics think it means. Because you end up with a lot of people thinking, well, there's a conflict between science and faith, and I'm all for faith. No, I'm all for science.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm like, no, there is no conflict.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
when you
Yeah.
when you update things, as Aquinas says you have to, right? You end up with a complete, whatever you believe in your religion has to work with the science, because otherwise you've got to dump or change, whatever that is,
Right.
until the science changes, and then you go, oh, well, maybe that was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose I would have to explain that I'm very comfortable in my beliefs. I keep reading all the time,
Yeah.
because it's dynamic. There's
Yeah.
stuff going on. There's people arguing about the quantum world and how that can be interpreted with regard to the soul. And,
Right. Right.
and I get turned on by all that stuff.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to click, for it to how old were you when you were like, oh, this finally all clicked?
In my 20s.
Oh, okay.
Well, because I was in college. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks initially.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was full-time philosophy major, taking every course that that Westchester offered, and it was a full. They had a full range, lots of professors, and I was low student ratio to teachers as majors, right? Big college, but they mostly had intro courses and things like intro to philosophy, intro to logic that everybody in the campus had to take to graduate.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of professors, but at the time I think there were about 20 of us that were majors in philosophy, and in the graduate department was even fewer, and so I had personal relationships really, with the faculty, and lots of work, and reading was constant, so I went through all of that in a matter of altogether 8 years.
Yeah.
And by the 8th year, of course, I had the solutions by year 4 or 5.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was learning how to interpret newer things in light of those.
Yeah.
And then I joined the army.
Oh, so you went to college first and then joined
Then
Army.
I joined the army.
I was gonna ask if you used the GI Bill or.
No, I didn't. Well, my college, by comparison today, I paid for with work that I did at nighttime.
Oh, so you worked for the school or.
I worked for a retirement home as the night watchman. So I would come to work at 4:30 in the evening and sit there at the desk until 7 in the morning. So 14 and a half hours
Yeah.
a shift. But I was sitting there at the desk reading most of the time.
Oh, that's nice.
And they had a typewriter, so I could type
Yeah.
papers, and basically it was like forced study, and I was paid
Yeah.
$1.65 an hour, you know,
Oh.
to do it. You know, so, you know, heck, I had enough money, we got married my senior year,
Oh,
and
wow.
I could afford the rent and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. What made you join the army?
Well, when I finished, and I looked around for work and everything, I did work in a few things,
Uh-huh.
and, you know, I was, you know, no way I wanted a life of that. So I thought, what else? And at the time, the Vietnam War was over,
Mm-hmm.
and the Army became a volunteer army instead of the draft.
Okay.
And they raised the money, and they were having trouble getting recruits because everybody was like, who wants to join the
Who
Army?
wants to, yeah.
And so I was like, you know, now is the perfect time to join the Army,
Yeah.
especially when they offered to give me a year's language training.
Yeah.
That's,
That's
you know,
awesome.
that was the real attraction to me because I thought, I'll join the Army, get this language, you know, and then, you know, I could become a translator afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that it was such an excellent career choice for me, really, that I stayed.
How long were you in?
16 years, 9 months, and 3 days.
Wow. That's
But who's
awesome.
counting?
Yeah. That's awesome.
And then they offered an early retirement. So,
yeah, I'm
so-
like, oh, because usually it's 20.
yeah,
So
and I
you-
was planning on staying, you know, if I could,
Yeah.
that whole 20. But when, you know, the Russians collapsed, Russian linguists were like, well, you know, we don't really need all of you anymore.
Yeah.
So they offered us, you know, in my pay grade, in my language, they offered us an early retirement,
Yeah.
which I took and came up here and I started teaching.
Oh, so you came up to Alaska on your own? You weren't like
Well,
stationed?
I was stationed here for 4.5 years
Oh, nice.
as part of the 16 years, 9 months, and 3 days.
Wow.
You know, I mean, the last tour was in Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
where you know, we were supposed to be there 3 years, but that's when the retirement was offered. So I missed really like a few months of that 3-year commitment. But,
Yeah.
but I mean, that was fine.
Yeah.
And we had kept the house. We bought a house when we came up here in '87,
Uh-huh.
and we still had it. And so we moved back, and I retired here and put in my paperwork asking to teach, and they called me the next day and gave me 2 semesters worth of, you know.
That's awesome.
So, timing and location, you know,
Mhm.
there weren't very many people ready to teach philosophy here, and they had a spot, and so I ended up retiring, and not immediately, but once the semester was open for me to teach, I moved right into it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's awesome. I was in the Air Force. I was a dental assistant. I'm using my GI Bill now. But my friend was a Korean linguist, and I just thought it was so cool. I mean, I met her afterwards. We were both separating, but that would definitely have been a really cool job. I mean, dental assisting was, you know, it got me. I'm going for medical.
a lot more opportunity when you get out.
Exactly.
for sure.
Yeah. So that definitely set me